Good morning. It's Saturday morning, and as we all know, Saturday is a special day. This has been confirmed by scientists just yesterday. If you didn't see it, it was trending on Twitter. Saturday is a special day. It is the day that we get ready for Sunday, but more importantly, since we're not going to church these days, we don't need to do all the things in that song. Saturday is a special day because it's time for special day morning. And that has also been fact-checked and peer-reviewed by the best scientists, that in this time of quarantine, the song is actually named after the podcast. It used to be the podcast named after the song. If somehow you're here and you don't know my reference, this is a Latter-day Saint / Mormon children's hymn sing-along song. Saturday is a special day. It's the day we get ready for Sunday, and I based a whole show on that for some reason, just because I wanted to do it on Saturdays. I don't know, was it the best name? It stands out if you search for it on iTunes, which we're on, by the way. I don't know if that was the case at the end of the last episodes. But yeah, it comes up. Mormcore has worked pretty well for me. Special day morning seems to be a good, easy search term. What will I do next? Who knows? So you have found yourself in something that I'm trying not to do too many takes. I'm trying to keep it fresh, but this is what I have decided to call, thanks to a little spark of inspiration during my last go at this, the preamble ramble. Welcome to the preamble ramble. Maybe someday all these little segments will coalesce and they will all have their own little jazzy intros. Michael Maurice, my wonderful producer for Hivecast, unfortunately not for this project. I wish I could pay him to do this, but I have a lot of time on my hands and not a lot of money. But anyway, if you're listening, Michael, maybe you can make me some little theme stings. I got the preamble ramble. I got a segment at the end of After Dark tonight that I just called Shameless Self-Promotion. Anyway, we're about 3 minutes in. I think that's enough preamble ramble. I thought I might have some things to say, some insights to add to this interview. I don't really. I was happy with how it went talking with Adam. If you want, we are discussing the album Double Negative by the band Low. And if you want to pause right now and listen to that album, it's a good one. Put it on in headphones, lay on the ground, maybe not make the room too dark or close your eyes like I did, because you might get a little snoozy. Not that it's boring, it's just very sonically... it washes over you. That's the best way I can say it. Any other thoughts leading into this show? Not really. I thought that maybe I would take some time before the shows to talk. I'm sure I'm repeating something I just said 30 seconds ago, but I don't have a lot on my mind. I made a blog post. I've launched a Patreon. I'm continuing to dip my toes into every medium out there, and I don't know why. I'm busy. I'm not working a day job, but I feel like I'm at full-time capacity right now. You can check out my Patreon if you want. I'm not going to spend too much time plugging it here. I don't want to feel like, even though it is a big deal to me if people will support me, I don't want to be a guy who's just constantly harping about the Patreon, because I do like what I do as a hobby, although I would like to turn it into a job somehow. So yes, I'm making Mormon Garfield every morning, or releasing them every morning from a batch I've made, whipped up in advance. I made a blog post, might do more of that. Maybe I'll just start doing more preamble rambles, and I will insert a time code. I'm going to do a preamble ramble insert at the beginning of this. You know what? No, I'm not. That's dumb. I started off so nice. I said, good morning, it's special day morning and all that. I don't need to insert a time code for when you can jump to, but maybe in the future I will consider it. Thank you. Thank you for bearing with me as I put all this together. It felt like just a minute ago it was 3 minutes in. Now it's almost 6 minutes in. Let's get started, shall we? Without further ado, here's the interview. So we're only 2 episodes in, and last week we talked with Camilla, or 2 weeks ago rather, about an article she brought to me, and I kind of determined at that point that originally I wanted to kind of share 2 things, to bring something to my guest and have them bring something to me. But in the course of spending a good 45 minutes to an hour talking with Camilla about her article, it kind of fell into place that the better way to go was just to have someone bring something to me. And the direction I took from last week's episode was that I wanted to try to theme it as the guest, friend of mine or acquaintance or whoever I have on. I wanted to ask them to bring something to me that kind of reflected a lot of their personal beliefs or was meaningful to them. And we could kind of share that thing together. And maybe in the course of that, I could uncover a little bit about what I believe, since that's always a jumble. All right. So the guest I have for the show this morning is Adam Alba, who I've known as an online friend for maybe 6 months or so. And I'll have Adam introduce himself because as an amateur host, I meant to ask a few details, like the proper title he would want to be introduced as for his profession, and I didn't do any of that. I'm still struggling to even set up this recording situation, but Adam, why don't you just jump into it?
All right, thanks. So you were like way off though on how long we've been online acquaintances.
Oh, really?
I think it's been about a year. It was like the summer of 19.
Yeah, I guess you're right, because that's just a pandemic time thing, I think.
Yeah.
When I say 6 months, I think like, oh, we're just a few months into this year, even though it's going to be almost September soon. So
yeah, I mean, it's okay because we're all under this pandemic time warp. It's, messing with lots of things. So
yeah, it's insane.
Time and space appears to be one of those.
Oh, I think you're right, about a year.
Yeah. But thanks. Yeah. Thanks for having me and being willing to discuss something that I like a lot. My name's Adam, and I am a lawyer by day. Just do litigation. I joke around that I help rich white guys sue other rich white guys. But yeah, and I like music and art, and I'm happy to know you you're one of my favorite artists. And so this is a cool deal.
Thank you. That's really nice of you to say. And as you were talking about that, I actually did remember the circumstances we met under were an actual meetup in person.
That's right. At the diner place.
Yeah, the Belgian Waffle and Omelette in Midvale, which definitely places this closer to a year ago, because that was on Pioneer Day. So
yep, that's right.
So thinking about mostly chatting with you through Twitter, and the pandemic definitely erased all that came before. So
yeah.
So today, Adam discussed with me a little bit, but I kind of went in blind, this album by the band Low called Double Negative. And I listened to it today to make sure that it was really fresh. And that's mostly what we're going to be talking about, I think, as well as whatever spins off from that. But a little background, and maybe Adam can even give it better than I can. I tried to do a little research, but I've known about Low for maybe a year or so, maybe about as long as I've known Adam, as a quote unquote Mormon band. They're not really LDS in theme, although those themes definitely come into their music. They are a couple. They've been married since the early 90s when they started the band together. They're from Duluth.
The birthplace of Bob Dylan.
Oh, yeah?
I think so.
I had no idea.
Yeah, that's where he was born.
Yeah, I only really know about him like showing up to New York, but he had to come from somewhere before that. So small town like that is cool.
Yeah.
And they're really cool. Correct me if I get this wrong, but it's Alan Sparhawk and Mimi Parker.
Yeah. And then they have a bassist, a guy named Steve Garrington, I think is how you pronounce it. He's been with them as their bassist for maybe 10 years or so. They've had a few others, but I think he's one of the longest lasting of their bassists. So it's just a trio, just the three of them.
Yeah, and their music has been pretty influential. Whether or not you care about certain music scenes or reviews, like, for example, Pitchfork or any other, maybe you could call them hipster or underground music scenes, they're kind of a darling of some of those scenes, and they've been putting out albums since the 90s, like I said, early 90s. They've had a lot of evolutions, which I have not yet explored. This was kind of my first album. And I know you'd shared this album with people online before, and I had seen it around, and I tried to get into it at one point, but it's not really an album that you can just kind of put on in the background while you're working. I mean, maybe you can once you know it, but it's an experience that you kind of have to submit to.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's best. I mean, God, some of this is going to sound so pretentious, but like it's one of those albums that like is best listened to if you can like really focus on it and kind of immerse yourself in it. You're right. There's not a lot of payoff if you're just going into it casually. And there's a place for that music where you can just go into it and just have fun with it. Don't get me wrong. But as far as like, meaningful music to me, I think music that, that is a little bit challenging at least can have a lot of meaning. And this is kind of one of those examples.
Yeah, I totally agree. And my background, like I'm pretty into some forms of experimental music, and I can subject myself to some pretty odd stuff that most people might find kind of grating or unpleasant or just nonsensical at first glance. So this wasn't totally a foreign experience for me, but like I said, the first time I tried to listen to it maybe it was a few months ago, you start right in, and I'm sure we can kind of get into the different tracks, if I can even remember where one ends and the next begins.
Yeah.
But you start off and you're immediately thrown into a very, it's distorted, but the word I'm looking for is, I guess, more degraded.
Yeah.
It sounds like they definitely started with something more maybe conventional and just kind of broke it down over a long time. I don't know if that's the actual recording process, but that's just what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, that is what it sounds like. And the common thing that people talk about with this album, especially when it opens, is like, are my speakers broken? And that's like, so, I don't know, that's because it sounds like what is going on? What is this sound? It sounds like there's like all this clipping, like the speakers and are going out of control, and so it's kind of weird, and it's easy to get thrown off by that. And it's oh gosh, I just don't want to sound pretentious, but that that's what it is like challenging, and it sounds like maybe the speakers are broken.
No, I think that's spot on. And I think it's really cool because I think, this album came out in 2018. So it's not super old. It's pretty fresh. But I've noticed a trend in music in general that seems like these things always kind of start more experimental and they bleed out. And I'm not saying that necessarily this could be traced back to this album versus a broader scene in experimental and ambient music. But I think there are effects like that you kind of start to hear come through in the mainstream. I know that you are a fan of Billie Eilish.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan. I just don't really know a lot of Billie Eilish, but I was listening to a song on the radio sometime last fall maybe, and I was noticing that she was kind of using some of that distortion that almost sounds like your radio's broken or your speakers are clipping. And that's something that I'd always kind of wondered about, if you have these features of analog media that have been used to effect, but now it seems like we have people who have grown up through more digital mediums and they're using those distortions, and those are even starting to bleed through into the mainstream, at least based on that one moment where I was kind of like, hey, this bass sounds like it's clipping, but that's on purpose.
Yeah. So I wonder, I think that's part of it, like using these digital tools to manipulate things. I also wonder if like these kind of sounds are a reaction to like really, really polished pop, like radio music. That's like just really produced and really slick. And there's this effort to kind of push back against that, maybe.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's an element of it. But then also, I mean, so for this album, Lowe worked with their producer was a guy named BJ Burton, and he has worked with, he's had like a lot of commercial success. He's worked with Bon Iver on the last album or the last two albums. And so he's not unfamiliar with commercial success and really slick production tools. And so, it's probably true that, he's at least riding a trend, or in some respects setting a trend for some of these sounds. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Before we get into the album itself, I guess tying into this theme I'm trying to run with that's still a little bit formless, but the idea of talking with friends and people that hopefully someday also I could talk with some, people that I wouldn't consider friends, but I would consider influences or other acquaintances or just whoever, about these things that matter to them on a spiritual or life impacting level. Going with that theme, why don't you kind of explain where this album came into your life and what meaning it had for you and kind of why you brought it today. And then we can kind of jump into the album maybe on a more piece by piece basis.
Okay, sure. So I had known about Lowe, for a while. Like they were, like you said earlier, they were introduced to me as this Mormon couple, and I'm Mormon, and so there's this kind of little connection. Like, oh, okay, what are these guys doing? And so I've been listening to them kind of off and on since like 2005. they had an album called The Great Destroyer that was really stellar. And I liked it, but I never really like got into their discography. I knew they'd been around a while, and I never like saw them live or anything. And then they were just kind of like always there, like consistently making music. And then around like 2018, 2019, I started to try to like, I don't know, like, I work at a desk all day, and it's hard to have a creative outlet sometimes. And I was feeling like this really strong urge around that time to try to start being more creative. And I thought I should try to get back into music. Like I'd grown up playing the guitar a little bit, and right about that time, this album came out, and it was kind of challenging. Like I said, at first, wasn't sure that I got it. I thought it was really cool that these guys were still around, that Lowe was still around. They were making music. But it didn't really click with me. And then they actually came to Provo, and they performed at this little venue called the Velour. And I went to that concert, and they played a lot of stuff from this album. And I feel like that's when it like really clicked for me. And it was so cool. Because it was just really inspiring to see these guys. I keep saying guys, but to see the band, I don't know, just working and continuing to make like just really cool sounds and really cool music that really demand your attention. And there's so many ways that it inspired me. I mean, one of them, I guess, is that, they're a trio. And so by nature, some of the songs and the arrangements are kind of simple, and the compositions are simple. And I was just kind of struck by that from like a creative level, like how they can get so much emotion, at least from me, through, a bass, a guitar and drums, and then some melodies and harmonies vocally. I thought that was really inspiring. So it just, I don't know, that was right around that time is when I was trying to be a little bit more creative. And then this came around, and it was very just inspirational to me from a creative level. And then I really dug into their discography and started to kind of understand the evolution of their music. And it just, from a creative standpoint, it's been really inspirational. I mean, I've tried to like knock off some of their sounds and their songs, and
yeah,
God, they're great. Like, I don't know. So does that kind of does that answer the question?
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, I could say more about it, but that was, I guess it came at a time when I was like really trying to find a creative voice, and it was really inspirational.
Yeah. How often would you say that you like go back to it or play it on repeat?
Oh man.
Is it like a special occasion thing?
No,
or is
it's
it
like a couple times a month. It's
Okay.
often. Yeah. Like, it hasn't worn out its welcome yet. It feels really familiar and safe. I still really like it. I listened to it today as we were thinking about this. And then I've gone through like the rabbit hole on YouTube and watched every live performance that they've done of these songs, and then others, just because seeing it live influenced how I feel about it too.
That's got to be really
cool.
interesting. I hadn't thought about how they would perform this with how meticulously it's engineered.
Yeah, so I was really curious about that too, and it's different because they just do it with the guitar and the bass and the drums and their vocals, and then just like minimal effects on pedals on their gear, and so it doesn't quite have the same sound, but the feeling, I feel like they did like a amazing job at capturing the same feelings. Like it's still really an immersive experience. It's really loud. It was really loud, but
today
really cool.
I put it on. I made sure that well, I should say that I'm no stranger to trying to give albums as a concept their proper due. I listen to shuffle and radio and mixtapes as much as anyone does now, but I actually do really like listening to albums through as a whole, and most of my favorite music comes from albums that I know more as albums than as songs. And I don't know how long that's been the case. I feel like there was an earlier time in my life when I didn't pay as much attention to that. But it feels like for a long time, my general course is that I try to get into a record that I've heard is worth getting into. I usually start with the catchy singles if it has them. And then by nature of kind of hearing what the next song is after that, maybe I'll catch something on that. And it's kind of a process of spiderwebbing out from like the catchiest songs until you're stringing everything together and you just can't listen to it without hearing the whole thing.
Yeah.
This one, since it's just due to its nature and due to the fact that I wanted to hear it today before we talked about it, I made sure I had it saved on my phone instead of streaming just to make sure the quality was good. And I listened to it with headphones, and I kind of I'm at home a lot lately because I'm working more on side freelance things than doing a 9 to 5, which has its own pros and cons. But one of the pros was that I could just kind of be at home alone and with all the lights off and just kind of lay on the floor and listen to it, which I eventually had to sit up and stop because some of the songs actually were kind of almost putting me to sleep with the drone. But it was really cool. It was had a bit of a false start because I didn't realize that my phone was set on shuffle. So I was like, some of these songs are jumping around.
Yeah.
And then I was looking at the lyrics and I realized they were out of order. So I started it over, but it was great. So yeah.
I'm dying to hear, like, I mean, what are your, you like music. I'm just dying to hear, like, kind of coming into it cold, like, what were your thoughts? I've tried to get, I've talked to my wife about it. She went to the concert with me, and it didn't click for her as much as it did for me, and that's fine. And music is like so subjective, but I love to hear what people think about it. So that's why I suggested it. So I don't know, what were your thoughts?
So yeah,
did you like it? Did you not like
I
it?
did. I liked it a lot.
Okay.
My initial impressions were that I liked it. I'm definitely going to need some more time with it. I should have taken some more notes about, like, I have a few songs I know stood out to me, but I could have probably had a little bit of a notepad out to jot down certain moments. But well,
that's cool. You liked it.
I did. I liked it pretty much across the board. I will admit that by the time I was coming around to the second half of the album, and it's not super long. It's, like an hour-long album, would you say?
It's like, I think it's like 48 minutes.
Yeah. By the time I was coming around to the second half, I was a little bit more distracted with things I was dealing with on my phone and around me, but I was still I was kind of zoned into it by that point.
Cool.
And
I'm glad you liked it.
I liked the variety of the fact that some songs were so distorted that you couldn't even barely make out the lyrics, and others were so harmonious and maybe not traditional, but they were definitely more. There are tracks on this album that you would probably show someone first if you just wanted to show them something more pretty from it or beautiful.
Yeah. So can we talk about that, like that aspect of it?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so here's another thing that inspires me about it. So like on the surface, right? If you just kind of like, if you're listening to it in the background, you're just like, you're hearing like a lot of noise, like thumping and this kind of like rattling sometimes. But like it always comes around, like the album and even within the songs themselves, like there's always like this layer underneath, or like kind of running through it of like this beauty, right? Like, so there's like maybe like these distant harmonies in the background and they sound really good, or there's this like cool guitar, it sounds like it's underwater or something, and it's really beautiful. And I like, to me, that is like a reflection of kind of like the times that we're living in, right? It feels really crazy, and but underneath it, there can still be some beauty and that can run through it if you kind of focus on it and look for it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was intentional. I think it probably kind of was a little bit on their part. Because they're always, through their discography, like they've always had just like such a knack for like getting these really beautiful harmonies and melodies vocally, and then through these simple arrangements, it's been really great. And that still, it continues through with this. And so, but they added all this other weird distorted stuff. And I gotta think that was intentional. I don't know. Like,
yeah, I was
like finding meaning and joy and beauty in the face of like otherworldly weirdness. Well, so that's part of why it's
trying
inspiring.
trying to read a little bit about the the background, of course, and the band and everything in general. And I think that I did read that this was made obviously halfway through the current political administration, and Alan is not unvocal or not silent about
he's not shy.
his opinions.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I'm trying to remember and make sure I don't cross any wires. I think he definitely talked about the atmosphere of America that he was seeing. And I think what you're commenting on, whether that was like directly intentional or just came out through the music, I think that's a pretty awesome point about this album, and kind of about the idea of trying to keep an eye on the classic, beautiful parts of life, even while we're dealing with some pretty ugly things.
Yeah.
And then I saw someone, I think this was just a YouTube comment when I was watching something, where someone was kind of wondering out loud if Low would ever release an undegraded version of some of these songs down the road.
Yeah.
And if that even exists, I don't know what their process is. But I thought that was kind of a bit of a interesting parallel to what you're saying, is maybe if things clear up, some of these harmonies could still exist as more of a forefront in maybe a cleaner album. But I don't think it needs that, because I think what it is on its own stands for itself.
Well, it's kind of like, sometimes you'll appreciate the cleaner harmonies and the beauty of it when you kind of go through the harder part. And so maybe the harder part is what you need to appreciate more the opposites in all things, I guess. Like if we could reflect on our Mormon heritage.
We can always go back to the album at any point, but I did want to talk about that a little bit with, obviously everything I do to some extent has to tie back to kind of the Mormonism. That's kind of the niche that I've built myself in. And of course that was a contributing factor in discussing this album with the background of Alan and Mimi. Someone I was talking to recently, I think it might have been our mutual friend Rusden. We were talking a week or two ago about what the future could look like for members of the church who aren't very traditional. And he mentioned Alan Sparhawk specifically, because I think I had kind of asked, like, is there a place for a member of the church who is like a true unabashed artist member of the church that's kind of different than like a Brandon Flowers or Imagine Dragons kind of sense. You know, you have these artists out there who everyone kind of knows that's their background, and the themes definitely come through, but they don't really, you know, it's not really in the forefront of what they do. And so he mentioned Alan Sparhawk as someone who I definitely saw reading some interviews and stuff today, who's not in any kind of denial. He's not, you know, out proclaiming his Mormonism, but he won't deny talking about it. And at the same time, he also won't deny talking about, he'll swear, he'll say what he wants to say, he'll talk about his drug use. And there was an article I sent to you today that I had read about, he was kind of talking about some rough patches in his life, to put it lightly. And it was really interesting to me because it seemed like he's the kind of guy who will drink and do drugs, but at the same time never say like he's not a Mormon. At least that was the vibe I got. I obviously don't know as many interviews, and I've never met the man, so he's not here to say for himself. But it kind of seemed like this interesting position of like, I'm a member of the church no matter what, and that can make people feel really uncomfortable, and I can understand why if there's someone who's trying to say, yeah, I'm doing the same thing as you, even though I might not be following all the rules. I can understand both sides of it, both as a lifelong member of the church from a pretty orthodox background and as someone who has kind of been a bit of an outcast and semi-rebel himself. I don't know. I don't know if I really have a question to ping pong back to you about all that, but like, what do you think about is there a place for like a Mormon artist who's a Mormon artist, but they maybe don't fit the mold?
Yes. I think so. And I don't want to speak for Alan or where he's at spiritually, but one thing I've picked up on from, music and the interviews that he's done is that, drinking and marijuana use certainly have been a part of his life, but he's always also been so quick to comment about the he doesn't talk about it in a way that he's like proud of. It's not like it's not like he's doing it out of a rebellion against Mormonism or against his upbringing. He talks about it in a way. He's very vulnerable about it and open about it, but he also is open about the fact that, doing that, dabbling in that, or maybe even more than dabbling, has given him a lot of, guilt and insecurity about his relationship with Mormonism. And I've just really appreciated that vulnerability. And I think, that's something we could all learn from, and as an artist, or even just as someone who's trying to follow the precepts and the guidance from the church, is that, yeah, we screw up. But we still want to be a part of it. And we still get inspiration from it. But we're working to improve, I guess. I don't know if he would say, you know what I mean? I've liked that about his approach and about other people, their approach to it. It's just like this acknowledgement up front that, they're not perfect, but they still love it, the Mormonism and their, activity and membership in the church. And, but they acknowledge that they're not perfect. I think we could all benefit from a perspective that's more like that.
Yeah, that's a good way to articulate it. And I should just say, like, I am not a person who is a big advocate of, trying to say that the church shouldn't have any of the rules it has, because I do think that, if you're going to be a thing, you're going to have lines that show what that thing is. And we could talk about whether those lines should be a little fuzzier or more case by case, or whatever the way to approach that is. You could talk all about that, but I think that a religion has, its own set of guidelines and rules that are there to define the religion. And so I don't want to say that, I'm pining for a future where there's a Mormonism that's just purely cultural.
Yeah.
But I think you're explaining it pretty well in saying that he just shows a vulnerability about it. And I think that the difference between him and someone like maybe a Brandon Flowers, and again, I can't pit these two guys. I can't compare them or pit them against each other because I don't know either of them or where they're at. But it seems like it's more of a, one is more of a, like you said, this is who I am and I don't love all of it, but this is who I want to be. And another one is kind of more just, I have a Mormon background. Not to trivialize Brandon Flowers because I admire him too.
Yeah.
But it seems a little bit more incidental to, I don't know. He's an interesting guy that you could talk all about too.
Yeah. Yeah, he is. Well, I mean, just, there's, you don't have to talk, we don't have to single Brandon Flowers out particularly because, we all know people who, it's just their Mormon identity is just kind of a footnote in them. And,
I guess that's the broader point.
Yeah.
And I mean, Brandon Flowers has been through his own, ups and downs too. And he's been vocal about that as much as he's
that's true.
comfortable about being, which is fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, that's, it's an interesting perspective, like from the art too, from the perspective of like creating the art. I mean, I think one thing that's helped Low have a lot of critical success and some commercial success is, I mean, they're not like trying to cater to like a specific Mormon audience. I mean, there's certainly like some themes in their songs that probably come from their religious backgrounds, but they've got just like they kind of create stuff that's for a broader appeal. I don't know what the point I'm trying to make, but as like, what, I don't know, as
well, I was just thinking,
I guess their music isn't like defined by their musical identities, their artistic identities isn't really defined by like being Mormon. And that's kind of interesting, but they don't hide the fact that they're Mormon.
Exactly. And I think what just stood out to me when you're talking about that too, is what I was reading is, they don't really try to cater their identity to their music scene either. They're very experimental.
Yeah.
They've said before that they've taken a lot of risks in, putting out very different records or in the way they've handled their entire musical career. It seems like the most interesting thing, if you could kind of sum all these things up into one, is that they're independent. They are who they are. I mean, they're part of a lot of different communities. They don't, they're not apathetic to their fans or their faith, but they just kind of speak their own voice.
Yeah. Well, think about it. Think about also that's manifest in like their, they live in Duluth. They're from Minnesota, and Duluth is like cold. It's not exactly the first city you would think of when you're like, where's the hottest music scene?
Right.
And I love that about them. They like it there, and they don't bow to pressure to go to New York or to LA or whatever. They know what they like. They know what sounds they like to make in music. They seem to just like have this kind of like comfort and this confidence, I guess, in their identities and what they like, musically and spiritually and geographically too. And that's like, I don't know, it's really inspiring to me, like as someone who's trying to be creative. Like they just they know what they want to do, and but they still take risks too, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I definitely related to that as someone with Camilla starting this art group and meeting all these local people who we were both kind of independently met each other and learned that we were both kind of thinking the same thing, which is like, hey, we actually like Utah and we actually like this stuff, this culture, even though it's kind of weird and kind of kitschy at times. It's just kind of our culture. And we don't really want to use it as a stepping stone to move on to bigger things. And I think that that's something that it feels like the bigger society gets, the more we're kind of getting back to going to smaller places. We expanded out to this whole global network, but increasingly it seems like we'd rather have our social media be more private, private group chats and things than adding everyone you've ever met in your life on Facebook and sharing, connections with people you haven't seen in 10 years. It's like we had that experience and now we're ready to kind of pull it back. And I guess we're just taking that one step further right now, where much like them and being in Duluth, and he's been in Duluth since he was like in elementary school, right? That's where they met as
or
kids,
at least,
I think.
At least somewhere, northern Minnesota somewhere, if not Duluth. Yeah. That sparked one more thought that I had, that like, if you're trying to make art, I mean, the stuff that really resonates with people is the stuff that, at least I think, that is kind of comes from a genuine place. Like if you're making art that you think is that you want to appeal to you want it to appeal to a particular group of people or something, I don't know if it's going to really do that well or resonate. I don't know. And so like that's what I have liked about what you and Camilla are doing is, it's like kind of owning this background and this identity and making stuff that you think's interesting. And that's resonated with me. And that's kind of what resonates with me with, like, to swing it back around with this album. Just it was risky, but it worked. They liked it and it worked for them, and it works for me too. So I think that's important when you're trying to make art. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was listening to, I think it was Dan Harmon who wrote Community and Rick and Morty.
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about kind of his philosophy, which is that same thing, which is if you're going to just talk about like the experience of being in writers' rooms where people they would write a joke and they'd say, oh yeah, that'll get a laugh, even though no one in the room was laughing at it. And it's kind of that pandering. And he talks about, writing a story that inspires you or a joke that makes you laugh is kind of the only way you have any kind of field test before you can launch something, if anyone else is going to like it. Like you might get some of those cheap laughs or cheap tears, but it's got to come from somewhere.
To be like really good.
Yeah, to bring it back to the album. Are there any tracks in particular that you have thoughts about? I'm trying to remember the ones. I really remember enjoying Tempest.
Okay, yeah. So I was gonna say Tempest. That was my most. How Spotify does those year-end statistics. Do you have a Spotify account? Is that how you listen to music or no?
Not currently, but I have in the past. Actually, my Spotify history is kind of based all around that year-end statistic because I was really into it, and then they didn't do it one year, and I got really like disappointed at the end of the year. And at the same time, this other offer floated up, so I like tweeted at them, and I was like, "If you guys don't bring back the year-end thing, I'm not coming back." And I've been meaning to maybe hop back over to Spotify
Yeah,
soon.
I mean,
But
it is what it is.
yeah, it's
That's how
kind of
I
silly, but it's pretty fun.
that's how I listen to my music. But anyway, so they did the year end thing, and Tempest was my most listened to song
Really?
for 2019. Yeah. So I love that song. I like where it goes, like just dynamically. It's there's that spot in the middle where it gets really quiet, and then at the end, I don't know the number mark, but there's the kind of part at the end where the bass just kicks in. It's just really, you just feel it in your gut, and then kind of off in the distance you hear Mimi like going high on this harmony that is it just sounds so cool. And the lyrics, I don't know what the lyrics are. I guess it's a reference to like it's pulled from Shakespeare. I think some of it is.
Yeah, I was just reading that on Lyric Genius.
Yeah, so I don't know what the lyrics really mean, but I just love the feeling that it feels like you're in a storm. It feels like a tempest, honestly. And then you like hear Mimi's high voice at the end, kind of like off in the distance. It's like, I don't know, it's really cool. So that's a standout one for me. And I also like Poor Sucker. That one's super cool. I think that's the 9th track or so. That's a great one. So those are kind of my two standout tracks. What about you? You liked Tempest.
I like Tempest. I remember a lot of mine do come more from the beginning, like I said, because I was kind of actively looking at the name of the track. So there's stuff in the later half I definitely liked. I think in the later half I liked Dancing in Fire, and I think Disarray stood out as the last track. The ones that are really coming to mind right now are Tempest and Fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was something I liked in all of them, but they definitely bleed together as one experience, so it's kind of hard to single out. I need to spend some more time with it.
Yeah. Yeah, you should. It's good. It's it's meant a lot to me, just creatively and spiritually, just kind of like like a life message, I guess.
Yeah. Do you think so? This album is something you definitely have to kind of experience, at least before you learn which songs you might want to listen to individually. You should really give it a playthrough all at once. How do you feel about the current state of music as someone who is making some music and listening to some cool stuff? One time my dad kind of lamented to me, and I knew that he was a music fan. He's big into Prince and was big into Michael Jackson, and a lot of R&B and some early kind of new wave stuff. But he was talking once about how casual music has become, and how, I'm trying to remember the word he used, but just how it's background. It's kind of a practical thing we put on. What do you think? With the current state of streaming and music, how do you think we can pay more attention to the experience of an album and make it a more purposeful experience?
Yeah, I don't know. Like as far as music creation goes, I think I take an optimistic view. I think this is the best time ever to be around for new and exciting music, just because the tools for making music are so accessible, and anyone can do it, really. I mean, you get like some free programs, and you can start making music and getting it on your SoundCloud. And the trick is kind of what you hinted at, is the trick is like finding the good stuff, and like getting the good artists to continue to make good art, because they got to get paid. And I mean, not paid necessarily. Well, yeah, I guess paid. I mean, no one's going to do it for free, I guess, unless, the real, the true believers may continue to do it for free. I don't know. But the trick is like, I don't know the answer to how to like have that music experience. I think some people just like music and they'll do it. they'll go through the effort to try to find it and have that experience, and others will just keep it on the background. I don't know, because go ahead.
It does seem like it just depends on the person, and I try not to judge, because sometimes I have, friends that I respect dearly who will just be like, oh, I actually don't really know any albums all the way through. It's just kind of not my thing. Or people who say, never really paid attention to the lyrics.
Yeah.
And that kind of sounds foreign to me at first.
Yeah.
But I guess, it's just how it is. I'm sure there are things that people probably question that I do that they think I should be paying more attention to. But.
Yeah. So real quick. So about that, I have a friend who, he says that he has, what do you call it? Like musical anhedonia or something. Like he doesn't have any sort of emotional reaction to music.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know if that's a real thing, a clinical thing, but that is so foreign to me. But he swears by it, and he says he actually misses out because he doesn't understand musical cues in movies. We all take these for granted. Like when something happens, when you start to hear certain music in a movie, you kind of know what's going to come next, right? So he says he feels like he misses out on that, and he has to use the subtitles because the subtitles say like, haunting music or whatever. Yeah. And then he also misses out because he says, his kids and his wife will be in the van, and they'll all be just like singing at the top of their lungs and looking like they're having the time of their lives, and it's so foreign to him. So like I've just kind of come to, I don't know, like accept that. Like just some people, like I'm into music, I really like it, but some people just don't, and I don't know, and there's no sense in really forcing it, I guess.
Right. No, I guess for me, when I think about it, I really love paintings and visual art, but I don't think I've ever looked at a painting and had it make me cry. And I know that's a thing for some people. I think even I was talking with, I think we were back at the Springville Museum sometime last year, and I was talking with Camilla about that. And at first it really surprised me to think about seeing a painting and being so moved. I mean, I've been moved by music and I've been moved by film, but I've never been kind of brought to tears by an image. So I guess, yeah, there are different forms for everyone.
Yeah. Speaking of being brought to tears by images, my wife was brought to tears once by a wall of dinosaur bones.
Really?
It was pretty, it was kind of cool.
Amazing. Yeah,
it was at, it was Dinosaur National Monument. And there's this, I don't know if you've been there, but there's this wall that they've actually built this huge building on top of to preserve it. And it was just this crazy collection of sediment and bones that piled up. And there's like, dozens of different species of dinosaur bones in there. It's really stunning to look at. And it was so effective to her. Like she started to cry.
That's amazing.
I didn't have that experience, but it made me appreciate it more.
Yeah, for sure.
People react differently to different things. Some people really love the visual presentation, and I guess some people just don't really care for music that much. But
yeah, well, I'd recommend this to anyone who is adventurous enough to try something. I'm sure there are people out there who are already ready for this album, even if they don't know it yet, and other people who might need to take some more time. If I had to kind of sum up everything we've talked about and try to extract a theme or a title for the episode, it kind of feels like this album and the discussions about being a Mormon artist and everything have kind of all tied back to this sense of duality, of kind of taking the chaotic stuff with the more orderly stuff and how we balance those two sides of life, paying attention to the beautiful things and kind of the dark things and how they usually intersect into something in the middle. And I think that everything we've talked about kind of touches on that. Do you have any thoughts about that before we wrap up, or or even before that, is there anything else you want to say about the album?
No, it's been great. Thanks for having me. And I agree that that's one of the reasons why it means so much to me. I mean, it, like I said earlier, it inspires me a lot creatively, but I think it's a good take on this mortal experience, and finding beauty and meaning in life in the face of lots of chaos and disorder.
Well, I think that's about going to do it for our time this morning. It's been so great to talk with you, Adam. If there's anything you want to plug for your own Twitter or anything, you can do so now.
No, just, Adam_Alba at Twitter. That's where you can find me.
Awesome. We'll list that in the show notes as well. And you can follow me at Mormcore at just about all over the place right now. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, YouTube, or you can visit my website, lazeros.net, LAZEROS.net. And I am currently working on getting a Patreon running, although it has a little bit of, there have been some technical difficulties, so we'll get it all ironed out. You can also follow Hivecast wherever you get your podcasts, or through Anchor. That's the podcast I do with Camilla Stark for The Archive, my art group. Or you can watch me stream sometimes on Twitch if I ever get around to that. Stay tuned for a little later tonight. We will be doing our episode 2 of Special Day Morning After Dark, and I'm excited for it. We have a guest on that is an anti-vaccine Lehigh, which is something I hadn't heard about. I don't know if you're familiar with that group, Adam.
No, but I'm excited to learn more.
Yeah, and Adam's going to be sticking around with me to talk with him. His name is Jared, and we'll see him a little later tonight. I think that's about all for the housekeeping I have here. So again, it was so great to talk to you, and for everyone else, just come back a little later tonight, and you can hear us talk with Jared of the anti-vaccine Lehigh group. Thanks so much. Bye.